Hello, hello, hello. This is the Lowdown Live. I'm Kyle Lowe, and I thought now's the perfect time to start a late night talk show. Anyway, let's get to the news. A few weeks ago, Fresno County Board of Supervisors installed not one but two signs that say "In God We Trust" in the board chambers. Now, it's unclear if taxpayer monies were used to install the slogans, but the installation was led by one of the supervisors, Gary Bredefeld, seen here explaining why you're going to hell. And if this sounds familiar, it's because in 2017, when Bredefeld was a Fresno City Council member, he got the same slogan installed behind the dais of the City Council chambers, but claimed the installation was privately funded. Either way, I think you need to be careful when inviting Gary over for dinner because he's probably going to install an "In God We Trust" sign and may or may not make you pay for it. The wannabe authoritarian dictator just lost a lawsuit to the city of Fresno and other small cities when the administration tried to not hand out federal funds that were already promised to the cities. City leaders celebrated the win, including council member Nick Richardson, seen here starring as Colonel Sanders in the Origin Story film, who said, "Don't F with Fresno," except he didn't say F. That's actually very badass, so sorry for calling you Colonel Sanders, Nick. In lost dog news, a dog named Marshmallow in Clovis is missing, and the reward for finding Marshmallow with an E is 3,000. 3,000 what? I don't know, but you will have 3,000 of them if you go find Marshmallow. So go find Marshmallow. Fresno County has set a limit on roosters to 5 roosters per household. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I wrote all these monologue jokes myself, and it's really hard to do. So let's move on to our guests. We have a crossover episode today because we're talking to the writers of the Munro Review. Doug Hoagland and Donald Munro. They're here because a little over a month ago, they published an article that has some of the Central Valley arts community abuzz, and not in the way that they usually do. This article dove deep into the salaries and workloads of 2 professors at the College of the Sequoias, Jay McDonald and Chris Mangles. These 2 professors have figured out a way to teach 36 units per semester each and rake in over $400,000 a year for McDonald and over $300,000 for Mangles. But the arts community found issue with the article itself rather than the possibly impossible workload of these professors. So I wanted to talk to Doug and Donald and get to the bottom of the situation, an article, and get answers the community had. Also joining remotely is Leah Dewey, a former fellow of the BIPOC Critics Lab at the Kennedy Center. So Leah, Doug, and Donald, thank you for joining me. Just to kick this off, why do you hate artists making money?
I love when artists make money. I think artists should make more money.
Good. Okay, so we do like artists making money here at the Lowdown and at the Munro Review. Okay, and then I gave the quickest recap of the article. Was there anything inaccurate in my quick overview? There's 2 professors. They're making a lot of money, but they're also teaching a lot of classes that may or may not be humanly possible to do. That's kind of the overall, if I had to recap it, the elevator pitch for this article.
Could I update a couple of the figures you gave out?
Sure. Where are we at for annual salaries?
So, and our information came from Transparent California, which is a website that tracks public employees' salaries.
Yes.
So for Mr. McDonald in 2023, his total pay was about $370,000. Okay,
so not quite 400,000. Okay.
But close.
But close, sure. Yeah.
And for Mr. Mangles, that same year, his total pay was $315,000.
All right.
So over a period of from 2012 to 2023, McDonald made almost $3 million in total pay.
All right.
And Mangles made about $2 million in total pay.
Okay. So this sounds great. Like, this is awesome. Artists and teachers of the arts are getting paid a good amount of money. But not only did you find out that this is that amount of money, but like the amount of work that they did to earn this money may or may not be humanly possible. It's 36 units each. But to back it up, where did this story come from? How did you, were you just perusing Transparent California and you saw this? Where did this come from?
So we get tips. Journalists get tips constantly. And so this was a tip that we received.
And you don't have to, I don't necessarily need you to disclose your sources.
But you know, all this information is accessible. And I can say that this has been the talk kind of behind the scenes
Oh,
for
okay.
many years. I mean, people know about Transparent California.
Yeah.
Everyone looks up each other's salaries,
Yeah,
basically.
it's a part you would use it if for you. You would use it as a bargaining chip. Like,
exactly.
hey, these people are making this much.
Exactly.
Why can't I? Okay.
And I want to make the point just to start out that what we're talking about is not so much an examination of how much they make. It's an examination of how much more they make than the average theater professor, either in the community college system, the UC system, and the Cal State system. So what we are able to find is that they're making, in some cases, 3 times the amount.
Yeah. So we pulled up
Yeah.
the professor at the time in 2023, the department chair at Fresno State in the theater department only made $105,000 of regular pay plus benefits. So the total would be $142,000. So half, less than half than these two folks at COS. And then if we compare this to instructional faculty, not even the head of the department, also comparing it to someone at Fresno State in 2023, made $77,000 plus $47,000 benefits. Their total salary, if you looked it up, it would be $127,000. Yeah.
And just to throw in the benefits,
that's healthcare.
Right. And Mr. McDonald, his tally comes in at just shy of $450,000.
Okay, so the number you shared with us just now, Doug, is the before the benefits
Total
number.
pay before benefits.
And then the number I referenced was after benefits, which is in fact more than even the president/superintendent of COS, Brett Calvin, who in 2023 regular pay was $318,000 and after benefits was $409,000. So they're even making more than their boss. And then if we compare that to even the president of Fresno State, Saul Jimenez Sandoval, made $336,000 and after benefits $509,000. So very, very close to even the whole president of Fresno State, who also again does a lot of work. that is no small feat, and that these professors are making this amount of money because they are doing their amount of work and plus some extra classes that wouldn't necessarily be on their workload. So they're doing theater classes, but then they're also doing some film appreciation classes.
But can I go back for a second? Because
yeah.
I think you raised some really interesting figures by citing some of the other folks.
Yeah.
So that goes to context.
Right.
And so I think it's important to note that this was not a one-off. We're talking about a 12-year trend in which Mr. McDonald was either the highest paid 7 times during that period. He was the second highest paid 5 times.
Yeah.
And
1 and 2 out of the last 12 years.
That's right. And as you noted, he does make more money than the superintendent/president.
His own boss.
And Brent Calvin told me that they know people have made inquiries about this over the years, and that they realize the optics don't look good.
Yeah. So
can I ask a question here?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Leah,
Can
no.
I hop in? Okay.
Please, yes.
So I think that question of the optics are starting to look bad, right? This to me, it seems like that's why the article was written, right? You were given a tip. We have to write on this because of the optics. However, both in the optics of it and in the article, there's not a point that is given for why it's being written. And I think the question that I have certainly, and that a question that I know a lot of the arts community in Fresno has nothing to do with the figures, nothing to do with the money. Obviously, that's a concern to people, 100%. But the issue that the people have is that you gave us all of this info and you didn't tell us why. all you did constantly, actually, I wrote down, points out in the article. So you identified the experience of these two men as unique, in which the theater professors are provided a large sum of money across a period on taxpayer dollars. You made that point multiple times. These men are specifically getting this much money using taxpayer dollars. To me, in my writerly mind, that's assigning fault to these men, that these men are wasting your taxpayer dollars. One, you both said that, or I don't know if you both said, I'm not sure who wrote which parts. You said multiple times that the men chose to take on such workloads, which ended up making them a lot of money. We also see later on, right, that they advocated for other positions to be filled. Chris was devastated when that could not happen. And so they didn't necessarily have a choice in taking on such a workload. You also showed how the COS President Calvin, said that it is a cost benefit to offer people like Chris, like James, other tenured faculty to take on these adjunct classes, so to speak, these classes which are outside of their own scope in order to save the university money. So I think we all agree it's wild that they get paid so much more than everyone. One, two, they do an ungodly amount of work that they should be compensated for. Three, why is COS not heeding the call of their people? And then four, why are you not placing this on COS? Why, or not necessarily on COS specifically, but why aren't you putting a point to what is being said? Why aren't you telling your audience like why you are sharing this information with them, not just giving this huge info and essentially singling out these two men?
Yeah, so that's, okay, 4 parts. Okay,
Can we break those down?
let's break those down. Let's start with okay, so you got the tip, you confirmed this information. What was your, well, actually, even before that, I'm curious, because you both worked on this article together, and most of the article refers to you as the Munro review, the royal we. Kind of what was kind of your breakdown of the responsibilities of this article? Doug, I know during the first year of Measure P, you dug into a lot of the articles, so I assume you were a lot of the research side of it. But yeah, how did the responsibilities of this article break down?
I would say that Doug was definitely the lead reporter on this. He interviewed both the professors in question.
Okay,
we ended up talking a lot about this story. I did a lot of background. One point to make back to Leah is that we talked to many people in the theater community who were appalled at these figures, who were upset, who were angry, and I'll just leave it at that.
Sure,
so
yeah.
I guess I just want to get that out there.
But is Chris responsible for that? Is James responsible for that? That's
Chris,
my point.
I can't speak to what Chris's motivation was, but when someone, I don't think administrators come to you and say, we want you to teach 500 students a film appreciation class. I think there is a choice that both of these men made, and they've made it for 12 years.
Have you been a professor?
Pardon?
Have you been a professor teaching an adjunct class?
I am a professor, yes.
But do you teach, I guess, yeah, that's a good question. You are a professor.
Yeah.
You
know what, Leah? You know how much I make?
Yeah.
I make $70,000 a year.
Okay.
From your position
at Fresno State.
Yeah.
Full-time adjunct.
But listen to that though. What is that to me and you? I don't make the money, or I don't choose who makes the money. Chris doesn't choose who makes the money. That's on the
so
high.
I take exception to that. This is a choice that these men are both making. They don't have to teach, as I say, 500 students in a film class. And to go back to your question of I guess one of your questions was, how does this, or what's the point of this, or how does this hurt anybody? It's that over the years, they have kept other faculty members from getting those adjunct jobs. I'd also like to point out that COS is the only community college that we could find in the state that even allows this.
Yeah.
Other community colleges say, nope, you can teach an overage of one class, but as far as teaching 36 units, that's just not acceptable. And the reason it isn't acceptable is because it is not humanly possible to put it in the time that you're being compensated for.
Yeah, so I guess that's one of the things that, well, let's put that into perspective. And it's different. I've never been a professor, but I've been a student. And the most units I took one semester at Fresno State was 18, and I thought I was going to die. Now, granted, the workload is different, but I can assume I haven't taken a film appreciation class, but I've taken music appreciation classes, and as a student. We sat in lectures and listened to a lot of history, and we listened to things and had to write papers about it. And I like to think that my professor read my papers. And both Mangles and McDonald both taught 4 of these sessions of film appreciation class per semester. Is that correct?
I think at one point,
At one point,
I think it was a couple of years ago, one of the classes had 400 students in it itself.
Yeah. So
the total number of students that semester was 700.
wow. Yeah. So trying to read 700 essays just sounds insane. And again, Mangles and McDonald, they don't choose how many students are in the class. Someone in administration chooses that. Someone made that happen. And to your point, Donald, yes, they chose to say, yes, we want to take this on, rather than, pass this on to another adjunct professor.
Or another full-time professor. For the amount of money that they make teaching these film classes, they could bring in a full-time tenure-track professor who majored in film.
Yeah, and in the article you mentioned that the bringing in more staff at COS is a lottery system, or not entirely up to the department. I think they request it. And
Doug, you want to speak to that?
Yes, but before we go there, can I go back to a point I think Leah made?
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. As somebody who worked in journalism for 40 years, I thought I heard her saying, well, what was the point of the story? Why did you do it?
Yeah.
And I think, and I don't want to sound self-righteous about this at all.
Sure.
Please understand that. But, our reporting indicated that these 2 instructors probably are the most highly paid theater arts educators in California, and perhaps the nation.
The entire United States. Wow.
So that's news.
Yeah.
Simply news that we reported on.
Yeah. And reporting this is great. And if it was the kind of article like, hey, check it out, we've got some of the highest paid theater professors, full-time faculty here in the Central Valley, but that's not the whole story. You had to share, like, how did this happen?
Right. Which is one of the reasons the article was long, because we wanted to make sure that we explored it thoroughly.
Yeah. And
gave both of those men an opportunity to state their positions, which we did.
Yeah. And I know I kind of rattled off some numbers, but I will admit I'm not very good at numbers. I'm not a numbers guy. And the thoroughness of the article I appreciate. But yeah, I think even
if I can clarify what I mean by what is the point, it's that yes, I hear you completely. This is very newsworthy. I agree with you. This is a fact that's insane, and we should talk about it. The point that I mean is the point for your readers. I'm pulling up, I think, Kyle, you put it in the script. The mission of the Munro Review is connecting, sharing, and valuing the arts in the San Joaquin Valley. I don't think it connected people. I think it made people really angry because, if I can just point out, Donald, as you were just sharing, you were saying they could have passed this off to another adjunct or a full-time professor. You guys cite in your article that not only did Chris advocate for that, I think it was the 3rd theater professor, though, not a film professor, Forgive me if I misremember. But also that COS Superintendent Calvin said it wouldn't be a cost benefit rather, to have more positions, because then they would have to fire more people later on. He said it just works better for us to only have these 2 men. So with that, having that information that you all have presented in your article, I still don't understand why we are placing this at Chris and James' feet. Like, that's the point that I know for certain many artists in the community have had, is that this is a huge issue. I agree with you completely. We need to talk about this. But Chris and James are not the ones who are stopping people from getting jobs as adjunct or full-time professors. They are not the ones who are saying, I'm the only one who can do this class. It's not these 2 men. It is COS. It is how they are using their money. You both have said this is unique to COS. Why are we not zeroing in on COS instead of these 2 individuals?
You know, Leah, I think that reasonable people can disagree reasonably about this. I think we're looking at the same set of facts and coming to different conclusions. I can tell you, going back to the idea of the Munro Review's mission, that valuing the arts also means being critical at the times that we need to be critical. And to me, that is valuing the arts, because it's saying it's important enough for transparency, and it's important enough to ask hard questions. Again, this has been something that's happening for 12 years. And I think as I reread the article, yes, we put a lot of the onus on COS because they're allowing this to happen. The other thing that is a big factor in this is the COS employment contract. Every community college system has a different different collective bargaining agreement. This particular collective bargaining agreement allows for this to happen, gives professors that prerogative to basically step in and say, I'm going to teach this, 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 and this. So
there's no cap. There's no limit.
There is no cap. So I guess my question would be, how much money would they have to make for people to
finally step in? And
yeah, is it $1 million a year? Is it $2 million a year? I mean, I think both to Doug and myself, we felt that the amount of money, particularly over this 12-year period, was so far removed, so inequitable compared to what every other public college professor makes, that it was newsworthy.
Yeah. So I guess what might have gotten lost in the sauce was like the ultimate objective. You lay out a lot of facts. You talk to a lot of people. That's one of the things, I guess, on the flip side, some people were worried about, like, you only were able to pull quotes from a handful of people, like one active student, one other professor, but we'll come back to that. But ultimately then, just to clear the air, the objective of the article isn't necessarily that Mangels and McDonald need to get out of town. Get out of town. You're making too much money. You're swindling us. What would you say the objective of the art? What change or what? And I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but what was your goal with this article? What were you hoping to see?
To report the facts fairly, thoroughly, and let readers come to the conclusions that they would. Yeah.
So you just wanted to lay it all out.
Correct.
All right. But you also don't necessarily, and I want to kind of wrap up this conversation with a question on what like a more equitable world would look like. But you were just hoping we're going to lay out all the facts, show everybody what's what, and hopefully the readers and the people in charge can make a decision based on everything out in the daylight?
Sure.
Okay.
But I think Leah raised an interesting point about whether this was laid at the feet of Chris. I think she mentioned Chris. And I just would note that, I mean, Chris, and who was I had a very pleasant conversation with him. I found him to be very amiable. I've seen him on stage. I know how talented he is.
Yes, I've worked with Chris Mangles before, and he's a pleasure to work with.
He was.
He is a fantastic artist. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to sit down with you two.
But could I note that we reported, as Chris said to me, that he was, and he used the word devastated, when a faculty committee that decides which departments are going to get new faculty members, they almost approved a new faculty member for theater arts, but in the mix of things, priorities in other departments, they lost out. So he was devastated, and he told me that, and I reported that. And, you know, Chris also made the point that the amount of time he puts in is for the program.
Yeah.
And that was reported. So not to have reported that would have been unfair, but it was included in the story. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we made every effort to give both men an opportunity to explain their positions.
Yeah.
And I'd also just like to jump in and say that I really want to make a distinction between the film classes and the theater classes.
Right.
The film classes are what are pushing them
above and beyond
to the extreme.
Yeah.
We couldn't find any community colleges that allowed more than 40 people in a film appreciation class.
Okay.
And at one point, COS was giving them 400.
Yeah.
When you work at COS, you get an overage per each student that you have.
Per student, wow.
So that's where some of these kind of astronomical salaries are coming from.
Yes.
So while I also admire Chris, I think he's really talented.
Yes.
But while I appreciate his passion for the theater program, it's really the film program that is pushing everything to a whole different level.
And then to clarify, Mangles and McDonald, they're the only full-time faculty in the theater department at COS?
Correct.
And there are other adjuncts, or there?
Well, there are two technicians who work in the department. One of their technicians does lighting, and he apparently he's identified in some documents as being adjunct. But the point is, they're the only two full-time people.
Really doing the work, at least on paper. Yeah. Okay. And then
And one more thing, just for context, the budget of the COS theater department with these salaries far exceeds any other program its size that we were able to find.
A student looking at, like, which school should I go to?
Right.
And say, I'm really into theater. Oh, this one has a big budget. I think I should go there.
Can I make just one other point about figures?
Yeah.
And I know you can get into the weeds, and you can, it's like you can get lost. But when you take the total pay that the two professors make and the two adjuncts make, that's $1.1 million.
For the whole year.
Yes, right.
One fiscal year.
And the COS president told me that a full-time faculty member with benefits and total pay, it's about $200,000.
Yeah.
So if COS wanted to, theoretically, they could take the amount of money they're spending right now and hire 4 or 5 full-time professors.
Yeah.
Now that would mean that the two current men would be earning less.
Sure.
But the point is, COS does have a remedy if they chose to take it.
Yes. Now, I don't want to forget this other question about where the funding comes from, but theoretically, or did, in your conversations with Mangles and McDonald, did either of them, did you pose that? Like, if COS could provide 1, 2, 3 more faculty members for the theater department or the whatever department the film appreciation class is in, would you then no longer teach all these extra classes and just teach the standard amount of classes? Did you ask that question, and if so, what was their response?
Chris said that he would give up some of his salary if he could, if there was another professor, and if he's doing what the workload he said now for the protection of the program. So when an additional professor comes on, they have the classes, they have the enrollment.
Yeah. He would be willing to let go of some of the work and responsibilities, and then of course the income that comes with it. Okay, so it's not also I feel like some of the community who had a reaction to this article felt like maybe like you want to take away their hard-earned money or anything. So even then, they at least Mangles is open to reducing the workload if more staff could come in.
I really believed Chris when he said the integrity of the program matters a great deal to him. Mm-hmm. He's spent, a career there building it up. So I believed him when he said that the program matters to him and that right now he's doing the workload, he says, for the protection of the program and for the benefit of the students.
All right. Okay. Cool. Well, then I guess I should just say, hey, Mangles, McDonald, if you want to come down to CMAC, I know Visalia is a little bit far from Fresno, but if you want to come down to the CMAC studio in downtown Fresno and talk about this, I'd be happy to have you on and discuss this further from your point of view as well. So one last thing that I had a question about, you talk about this as like, the taxpayers need to know where their money is going. This is, these people are making a lot of money. They're doing a lot of work that may seem impossible to do in a single semester, and the taxpayers are paying for it. When you talk to either the president or to these professors, did you talk about, like, obviously students are paying tuition, and I know tuition doesn't cover everything. Some of it's coming from grants and other state money. If 700 students are willing to sign up for a film appreciation class, how much of that would be coming just straight up from their tuition? And like, sure, if COS is just like trying to get their bag, like, yes, let's take on 700 film appreciation students so that they can pay enrollment and fees, and then that money is just going to the professors. Does it seem like that's the case, or does it seem like actual taxpayers who are not necessarily enrolled in these classes are paying for this? And again, like I know it's not like a all or nothing kind of situation.
Right. So school finances are really complicated. Mm-hmm. The community colleges are part of actually the K through 14 system. So that money is basically comes from state funds and then property taxes and all that good stuff that gets
which makes community college so affordable.
Which makes it so affordable. I think you have to look at some of the hidden costs, though. Yes, it might be more cost effective for COS to have a class of 400 students and pay overages, but you're also, I would like to think that you would want to have a diversity of viewpoints, of backgrounds from your faculty members. When you don't have that flexibility, you have the same people teaching everything.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real cost. Is it cheaper for all the film classes to be taught by these two gentlemen?
Online, to a Zoom call?
Doug and I went back and forth on this. It's a really hard call to make. But I think the bigger question is, why do all the other community colleges limit their classes to 40?
Yeah. And then how many units?
What kind of education are you getting if you're in a class with 400 with no graduate assistants or any sort of
the pie is the same size, but we all only have 24 hours in a day, and when that pie is sliced up among 400 students, it's a smaller slice that you're getting.
I'm sorry if it's like I'm overemphasizing this. This has been going on for 12 years. Mm-hmm. It's not just a one or 2 years of this happening.
Since COVID and everybody went online.
Right, there's something systemic here, and we are in the end talking about millions of dollars. I'd also like to point out there are other theater professors in other local systems who work really, really hard
Yeah.
on their productions.
Yes.
Really hard, lots of extra hours.
Yeah.
And as a professor myself, I can tell you I work really, really hard and
Yeah.
lots of extra hours. And there is an inequity here, which is what I think drew us to this story.
And again, I want to close this segment by talking about equity, but we do have questions from the community. And Leah, I know you kind of asked the first one already. Would you mind we'll do this as like a lightning round, because these are questions we gathered from the local community. Leah, would you mind reading question number 2 from questions from the community?
Yes. Number 2 is it a good idea to attack an arts program while across the country in 2025, the arts are under attack? The president, who is using the office primarily to enrich himself, named himself chair of the Kennedy Center and wants to change the name to the Melania Trump Center. He proposed to give himself an award, yet otherwise attacks the arts on a near daily basis. Isn't this situation at COS small potatoes in comparison?
Yeah. So in 2025, how does this move the needle?
I have to say, first of all, I take exception to the word attack. It was a report.
Yeah.
And we report from the Central San Joaquin Valley. We don't report from Washington. If we were in Washington, would love to get into those issues. Those are important issues that concern people. They concern me. But that we're here and we're not there.
Cool. All right. We also have another one here. Why go after the professor? Well, we kind of talked about this one. Why go after the professors instead of the system?
I think, Kyle, I do want to butt in on that one, Kyle.
Yeah, sure.
Why devote so much time of the article to the professors themselves instead of, as you just said at the end here, Donald, the system? This is a systemic thing. These men are 2 agents within it. Why focus on these 2 men and not the system as a whole?
Yeah.
Once we got into this story, we started realizing how complicated it was.
Yeah.
We didn't do a quick and dirty job on this. We actually spent a couple months tracking everything down and making sure that we could understand kind of the complexities of the situation. At one point, the president of the college couldn't even tell us what that other pay what that was.
Yeah, you made them do some work
He didn't even know.
to figure out.
So that is one reason why we spent so much time on that. We also wanted to give both of these gentlemen an opportunity to respond and to offer an explanation for the situation. We also spent a fairly good chunk of the story talking about how great they are.
Yeah.
You know, we interviewed students. We talked about the Kennedy Center honors. So
Speaking of the Kennedy
it's
Center.
not an easy story, right? It's not an easy story. It's not like, oh, these are bad people. They're wonderful theater professionals.
Yes.
And so we couldn't have done that in a story that was a third of this length.
And I think that's also what makes it so tricky. At least, like, again, I've only worked with Chris Mangles, and working with him was a joy, and he is very beloved in the community. So I think a lot of the, like, hey, you're saying he's doing something that maybe shouldn't happen, you know, whether or not he's doing it or it's a systemic thing. You're attacking this is an attack on my friend, and so I take it personally. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we have to remember that people who are nice, people who are respected, people who are talented, sometimes make decisions that don't work out in the long run for all of us. That shouldn't give them a blank slate to be able to do whatever they want. And again, I guess I just go back to the idea of how much would they have to be making for an outcry to be raised. I think it went far beyond what that limit was. But again, we can have differing views on this.
sure.
What choices are you talking about, though, Donald? Like, that's what I don't get.
Okay, so the choice, number one, to teach these film classes
It's not in. It's not
Right.
under the theater umbrella.
It's not under the theater umbrella.
Who would teach it if not them?
They would hire somebody to teach these classes.
Would they expressly hire it? Do we know that for a fact?
We had every single other community college we looked at had multiple film faculty members.
I
Remember,
understand
they're
that.
teaching
We-
classes with
see it.
40.
Do you think a professor has the power to say you need to hire more adjuncts?
Absolutely, they do. These gentlemen are also
But do you
the
think they
were
have the power
acting
to
as
make them
division
do
chair.
it?
They were acting as division chair. They were also administrators. So yes, I think you're trying to portray them as just like without any actionable qualities.
Someone walked into their office and said, "You need to teach these
And like,
film
okay.
classes."
Okay, right.
But
I think what I am is I'm looking for more of that in the article. I'm bringing you questions that I got from talking to dozens of people, and I am not exaggerating. These are questions from people in the community, just as you talked to, who feel like this was missing, and that is why I am asking this. That is why I am asking. I really resent that
Doug.
reduction of what I am saying.
Doug, do you want to speak to that?
Well, Leah, could you clarify your question for me just a bit? I want to respond, but I need a little clarity, please.
Yes. So what Donald had said, if I remember correctly, is that these two men made choices that are not beneficial for the COS arts community as a whole, however we define who it's beneficial for, by choosing to take on these excess course loads and take on these higher pay, right? What choices are they making? How are they actually agential in this being a problem, and not just also people who are dealing with a problem?
so I'm imagining a situation that was like, so 12 years ago, someone knocked on their office door and said, "Guys, we've got these film appreciation classes. I don't know who's going to teach them." And I'm just imagining they said, well, we could do them. We could do it. You know, they look at their calendar and they say, and then they look at how much they could get paid for it, and we could cover those, rather than possibly pushing back and saying, you really should hire some more teachers for that. Is that the close to the possible scenario of what happened? And again, we'll never truly know what happened, but I guess Leah, and correct me if I'm wrong, what could you imagine are some alternatives? And I guess we can kind of jump to what are some alternative solutions that either Mangels and McDonald could have stepped up to say, or ultimately the final question, what are some solutions that COS can do? But obviously Mangels and McDonald said yes to these classes. I don't know if they saw these on a roster and they put their name down for it, or someone asked them to take on these classes. But in your talks with them, did it sound like these were dumped on their desk, or they actively sought them out?
Well, I just want to reiterate a point that Donald made that I think really is important to know, that McDonald, for I think it's 13 and a half years, served as chair or division chair for fine arts. Includes art, music, theater arts. And
So he was, as the theater kids said, in the room where it happens.
Right. He was at the table at a certain level in terms of, advocating decisions being made about where, faculty was going to be assigned. And then Chris took that position when James stepped down.
Okay.
So both of these men have been, Chris is currently in the position, James was in the position to have a place at the table.
Yeah.
They aren't, they were wearing dual hats, instructors and administrators.
So you're saying they had the power
I don't know what goes
Okay.
on within the, the bureaucracy at COS.
Okay.
But I know it would seem from what we could gather, they had access to that.
Yeah. Or at the very least, they knew the numbers that, like, if I teach all of these classes, this is how this will shake out for me. And then obviously we have 12 years of data of that now, But yeah, okay. So not only, this isn't necessarily a situation of two professors sitting in the theater department and someone kicks in the door and says, we have no one to teach these film classes. I need you to teach them, or these students are not going to get the classes. This was them sitting at the table and divvying things up and saying, well, I could take that on.
And I also might note that in our reporting, looking at Fresno City College, they also have a film curriculum.
Yes, yeah.
And from what I could gather, there are, and I don't remember the exact number, I'm just gonna, this isn't a guesstimate, but 3 or 4 part-time adjunct faculty who teach those courses.
Yeah, so yeah, like it's definitely.
So there are people out there who are available, and I'm sure are probably looking for a full-time gig.
Yeah, hoping for that kind of work. Yeah. Leo, can you hit us with another question from the community?
Oh, sure. Yeah. What solutions do you see coming from COS?
You know, COS is under the jurisdiction of its own
District?
What do you call it? Education district. There's a board of trustees, and I would hope that they would take a look at this contract, this employment contract they had that allows professors to teach up to, you know, more than a double load.
And for people who might not be familiar, higher education is kind of a really big bureaucracy. So like COS is going to have their staff, like admin. They're going to have faculty, the teachers that actually teach the classes. Like you said, they have a board of trustees, and then the faculty is going to have like their own unions. The staff might have their own union. So there's at least like 4 or 5 entities that need to come to the table to make meaningful change. Am I understanding that right? I only have like an ancillary.
Sure. I mean, I think it gets really complicated, and there are a whole bunch of factors that go into it. I guess I just go back to the point I've been making again and again, that this community college stands out from all the other ones we looked at. And I looked at about 15 to 20 different community college districts, you know, in the state.
To compare.
Yeah. And so one reason why in the chart that we gave showing comparative salaries, one reason why those salaries are so much lower is because there are rules that you simply can't.
There's a ceiling.
There's an overage. You can teach a little bit of an overage, but you can't teach double or triple or quadruple or whatever somebody sets out to do. And you can't teach large lecture online classes to 400 people because there's a limit. So I don't know if that is something that every individual board has to decide. You know, if we were to revisit the story and report it even more, we would find out if maybe COS is breaking some sort of state education code. I don't know. But there's obviously something that's kind of at the top that needs to change.
Okay. Now let's imagine a world where there isn't so much bureaucracy for a change to happen. What would a more equitable world look like for arts educators, not just at COS, but across California and across the United States? You know, you yourself said you make about $70,000 a year as a full-time professor at Fresno State. You know, that in 2025, that might not, if that was your only income, which, you know, I assume there's other family and stuff coming together to make a household income. But, you know, if a single professor living alone, that might not be enough to live in California these days. And I meant to look up and I didn't, like, what is like a good livable wage for the Central Valley of California these days? Is it like $100,000 or $120,000 to live solidly middle class, own a home, own a car, have a family, and not be living paycheck to paycheck? I should have looked this up. It was on my to-do list and I ran out of time.
I mean, I can tell you that the median income for Tulare County is $70,000. So that means half of people earn more than $70,000, half earn less than $70,000.
Sure. Okay.
You know, it's a great question. I'm all for artists making a living from making art.
Yes.
And I'm also very much in favor of adjuncts. I know that this this has
As an adjunct yourself.
as you know, but also adjuncts actually. And the odd thing about this is that the way the system is set up, that adjuncts in community colleges make terrible money.
Right.
Terrible.
It's
money.
not a living wage.
It's not a living wage in any way, and that's why you have people like cobbling together.
Yeah, teaching at one school,
teaching
and
one
another
school, one school.
Right.
Now, so adjuncts at Fresno State better,
Yeah.
a better wage. So I think at the community college level, yes, you've got to be paying your adjuncts more. And particularly with theater, you often want to bring in experts. You want to bring in
Right.
somebody who's a lighting designer who probably has experience in the industry and
Yeah.
all that good stuff. But the amount that we pay them,
Right.
I can't say off the top of my head how much it is, but I think we saw in San Luis Obispo somebody making $7,000 for teaching an adjunct class for the whole semester.
Wow.
And this is really, I mean, a deeper philosophical question
yeah.
about, I mean, personally, I mean, I love theater. Let's just make that
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
Football's okay, but it seems crazy to me that we pay people to play what we pay people to play football, and then what we pay people to teach kids to read
Yeah.
is like there's such a huge
Huge gap,
difference.
yeah.
But that's such a bigger question than certainly we could get at in this article.
For sure. Yeah. That would be a whole
Or else
series.
it would have been even longer.
Right.
Yeah. What about you, Leah? What is a more equitable world? Again, not just at COS, but for any kind of theater training, education. How many? If you you yourself considered a career in education, arts education, theater education, for you to live comfortably, how many classes would you teach? How much money would you want to make?
Yeah, actually, like half of why I chose not to continue my PhD is because I didn't want to do that adjunct cobbling it together kind of thing. It's fully unsustainable. I have
You'd be Dr. Leah and still eating ramen.
Yeah, you can literally have a doctorate and, as Donald said, be pulling in $7,000 for a course. It's ridiculous. I think we would all be better off with like not having that kind of system. I think professor jobs should be easier to come by. I think it's ridiculous that you can lock a faculty line for 10 plus years the way they did at Ohio State when I was there. It's just so fraught. Theater departments, especially arts departments also generally, get faculty lines cut year after year after year, such that you have departments like at COS where you have 2 faculty members and then a higher level admin who sees that the department is running and running well on 2 faculty members and saying, we don't need to do anything. It seems to be working quite well. Whereas if we had a wider scheme, whereas if Chris and James and the other technicians and the students, if those voices were heard saying, we need another line, we need 3 other lines. I don't want to do this anymore. I want, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a large structural change. We have gotten here because we've prioritized saving the universities and colleges money, not because we've prioritized artistic education.
Yeah, it's a big question, and I think this will be an ongoing conversation. I'd be interested to see what happens in the future with COS, their theater department, their staffing. And again, I think we all want to reiterate, all of us in this conversation, we love the arts. We want artists to be paid an equitable amount, a fair amount, a livable wage, and we want the work to also be equitable. So,
And I just would like to kind of close
yeah, no,
with
please do.
telling Leah that I understand where you're coming from in terms of you feel that this story focused too much on the faculty members and not the system overall. And journalism it's a rough draft in a sense, and there are always changes that I will, I'll take a look at a piece. If you felt that way, then I think that's a very valid reaction to that story, and I understand where you're coming from. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, I guess before we wrap up this topic, Editor Kyle here. Editor, yeah. Okay, there was one more question from the community that we didn't get to, and I feel it's pretty important. So I emailed Donald. I got a response here. The question was about this article got quite a bit more spread than the usual MunroReview.com website because it was picked up by the Visalia Times Delta newspaper, and a shortened version of the article ended up in the newspaper and on the newspaper's website. So it was seen by a lot more people. So people wanted to know, how did this come about? Did the Munro Review contact them or vice versa? Was the Munro Review paid for this? So here's what Donald said. While working on the COS story, I contacted a colleague, an editor who used to work at the Times Delta and still has a supervisory role there. I wanted to get some context for the story and wondered if the Times Delta had ever attempted to cover it. In the course of our conversation, he expressed an interest in running our finished story. So he reached out to the newspaper, said, hey, can you give us some more insight? Have you worked on a story like this? And then they said, oh, wait, we could run this. And the Times Delta made no contribution to the story other than cutting it down for inclusion on their website and in the print edition. So none of their writers worked on the story. And it's become a trend among nonprofit news organizations to offer content to other publications. Fresno Land and Cal Matters are two examples of this. Their pieces often picked up for free by other outlets. The idea is that a nonprofit, part of the public mission, is to allow work to be shared. This is the first time the Munro Review has done this formally, though I welcome it in the future, and there was no compensation for printing it. So yeah, that was just another question I thought was important to the story, and we just, in the shuffle, like I wrote out questions in a particular order, and we got out of order as things do. I hope this was a good behind-the-scenes look at this kind of independent journalism, local journalism thing that's going on now as big journalism kind of moves out of smaller markets. Anyway, back to the video. Here we go. What would you like to say to those in the Central Valley arts community who may have felt that this was an attack, or they felt like their friends were being attacked? Any final statement for these folks that feel like this article is a tough go at their friends?
I think I just want to get back to the point I made about valuing the arts.
Yeah.
And that, to me, the greatest thing you can do to value a subject or a topic is to treat it seriously, to ask for transparency, to ask hard questions. Because when you don't do that, that things start to slide, that things, get accepted as that's the way they are. Mm-hmm. And that's what part of arts journalism, I believe, is about. So there's a lot that we do that is not investigative. Previews, reviews. I mean, we've written more than 2,000 posts in the last 8 years. And
amazing.
We cover as much as we possibly can. But I would just ask people to remember that as professional journalists, we really truly believe that transparency is the answer.
Cool. All right. Any last comments from you, Doug? What would you like the community to know?
Well, I guess I would say, after working as a reporter for 40 years, I really learned, and I know this is a cliche or trite, but I can't control the perceptions of people when you write something.
Sure.
So I think, the standard for me was this fair? Did we give both of these men an opportunity to explain their positions, to make sure that we had, like I said, given them their opportunity? And I think we met that, but I respect the fact that other people may differ on that. And, that's kind of at the end of the day, you just do the best you can. And I felt like we did.
Yeah, I also feel like, again, your work on Measure P, which if you still have time, I'd love to talk about Measure P still. I think, Doug, you do a great job at digging into the numbers and laying it all out in ways that readers can see plainly and dig into themselves. Because sometimes these government websites that are for transparency and for laying this out doesn't always do it in the simplest way. So I appreciate your reporting and deeper dives into these numbers, because again, I'm not a numbers person. All right, and then before we go, Leah, I want to thank you for joining us all the way from Chicago. You are not only a theater professional and enthusiast, you are also a nail artist. If people wanted to see your work, where can they find your work? How can people get a hold of you?
I'm so dead. Here's the current set. I'm on opal.lounge.nailstudio on Instagram. Thank you for the plug, Kyle.
No, thank you, Leah, for coming and joining us today. You guys are still good to stick around and talk about Measure
Sure.
P? All right, let's do it. So we're going to take a short break, but when we return, we're going to be discussing year 2 of Fresno's Measure P. Stick around. Welcome back to the Lowdown Live. We're here with Donald Munro and Doug Hoagland of the Munro Review. I want to talk about Fresno's Measure P and the arts funding it provides. Measure P is entering its second year of arts grants, and it's the nonprofit partner, the Fresno Arts Council, has conducted applications for these grants and just released their list of recommendations for the city, who should receive a grant and how much money they receive. But there seems to be a stir about equity on who is receiving grants and how much these organizations and projects are getting. Doug, Donald, today is a Monday that we're recording this. There is a Fresno Parks, Recreation, and Arts meeting tonight right after we're recording this. So some of this may be changing. But like I mentioned, there seems to be a stir about these recommendations as to who will be receiving funding from Measure P. But I guess to back it up, for those who don't know what Measure P is, Measure P was a ballot measure that was voted upon by the folks, the residents of the city of Fresno, for a sales tax that set aside money for parks. That's why it was Measure P. But there was also a cutout for arts funding as well. And initially people thought it didn't pass. They thought they needed 2/3, but it turns out they only needed 51%, and it did pass. So then they started collecting money, and last year was the first year of grants. People applied. The Fresno Arts Council read those applications, made recommendations to the city of Fresno. These are the people who should get it, and those people got grants. Most people got 90% of what they asked for last year, but this year the recommendations have been cut down. Only a handful of people are getting 90% of what they asked for, and a good majority of people, both organizations and projects, are only getting 60% or 30% of what they asked for, and that seems to be based off of how they scored on their application and the rubric that was used to grade that application. It was a 0 to 6 scale. A perfect 6 got you a lot of money, and then 5.0 to 5.99 was the 60%, and then the 4.0 to 4.99 was people who received 30%. And we kind of decided we wanted to talk about this a little last minute, so I didn't put as many notes together based on this, but a good majority are in that 60% or 30%, which, you know, if I was someone who sent in an application and I said, it's gonna take me X amount of dollars to do this thing, and then the Arts Council or the city comes back and says, well, we'll give you 60% of that, like, or 30% especially, can these people even pull off the ideas that they had to do with this grant money? So that's what I want to talk about today. Did I that was also like half of that was off the dome. Did I recap
think
that?
you got it. I would just add that it's also possible to get 0%,
And those who scored,
which is what
399
the Munro Review got this year.
so you yourself,
We are not getting any money at all. So, and I just throw that in there just for full
yeah.
transparency.
Though last year you did apply.
Last year we did apply and did
receive.
get funded.
Another big change that happened with Measure P this year is organizations last year could apply for both the funds for the overall organization just to keep the place open, keep the lights on, and a project. But this year, organizations were only had to pick or choose if they were going to receive funding for the organization or do a project, but not both. And then there were another thing that changed this year were 2 different categories: emerging and established. And with people that I talked to, the distinction between emerging and established seemed a little unclear. And I think the way I understood it, emerging was any organization or project that did not apply for Measure P last year, and established was anyone who was granted money, an organization or project who was granted Measure P funds last year and are reapplying. Am I understanding that correctly? Or
actually, I think it's also there's also a cutoff in terms of budget. So if you were 50,000,
Correct.
if you had a budget of 50,000 or less, you were considered emerging. I'm not sure about what the budget.
I understood it to be the other way around. If you were emerging, the ceiling of amount of money that you could ask for was that much. If you were an established project or organization and you were selected for Measure P last year, that unlocked the ability to ask for the higher amount. But I also, that may be my misunderstanding.
Yeah, because we got funding last year, but we still competed in the emerging category.
Now, and that was because
the budget was less than 50,000.
you asked, not only if you had asked for more money, could you be considered established because you had been?
No.
But also you also simply only
in fact,
asked
Kyle,
for
kind of one of the odd things is there wasn't even a question on the application that said, "Were you funded last year by Measure P?"
Yeah, so let's dive into that. The categories were kind of confusing. So and between the 3 of us, we don't necessarily know how those emerging and established buckets necessarily. What were the things that the categories that put you in an emerging or an established bucket? But then, let's talk about the application. I myself did not look at the application questions. I didn't personally have a project, although I am involved here at CMAC, and I may be involved in some of the other projects that may be getting funding. But I myself am not the applicant, so I didn't look at the application. What was the application like? As someone who filled out the application, what?
To me, it was very close to last year's application.
A lot of the wording
moved
its way over.
I mean, it asks questions about, what do you think you could bring to the cultural arts scene? What parts of the city do you feel you serve? Demographics.
Which I think is good. I like that Measure P is trying to target communities and neighborhoods that don't necessarily have access to arts.
The big issue I have with the demographics question is that there isn't an easy way to determine that without doing like a scientific sample of your audience.
Sure.
So for example, I went to a lot of productions where they said, "Oh, please scan this QR code and fill out our demographics."
Oh, a previous Measure P project is trying to capture that data.
And then you're asked demographic questions, and then that gets turned over to the Measure P board, or the panel, and they take that as some sort of,
Final say.
or what it really is, it's a survey of the people who bothered to scan the QR code.
Sure,
so if you really wanted to survey, it would actually be quite expensive.
Yeah.
And this is something that I've talked to a lot of people who have issue with these applications, that they're time consuming, they're overly tedious,
verbose,
and that you would almost need to be a professional grant writer or take training in grant writing to be able to actually nail this application. And to me, that defeats the whole purpose of trying to fund all different kinds of people.
Yeah.
You're basically privileging the organizations that have professional grant writers.
Sure. Yeah. And I also feel like for the first year, for the original round of Measure P applications, there were a lot of sessions, meetings, roundtables about filling out the application. And I feel like there was less of that. And maybe I had a baby this year, so I'm just a little less plugged in than I was last year. I feel like there was less of that this year for this second year of applications. How do you feel about how the public came to know about the application period and the application process itself?
I think all I can say is that I know the Fresno Arts Council staff made themselves available to people who wanted to apply.
Yeah, they didn't necessarily have a phone line, but they were able to.
I think they took calls from people.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Cool. Okay, and then this is kind of interesting to me because voters voted for Measure P. The money gets collected by the city, but the city has chosen the Fresno Arts Council to help with this whole process of who should get money. Is this something that's common for funding, even not arts funding, but just like, is there an organization on the park side of things that they're taking application information to figure out where parks are going to be built, or how different parks are being maintained?
That's a really good question. I don't believe so. I think that's all done by the city's park staff.
Right.
Arts is treated differently.
Yeah. But the city, to be fair, the city doesn't necessarily have an established arts department either.
Right. So I think that the issue that when we're talking to people, and Doug has talked to quite a few people, is that the application process is part of a bigger picture in terms of the types of questions that the application asked this year. I think were geared toward this idea of emerging access. Doug, you want to talk about emerging access, how people can have two different sort of views on what that means?
Sure. I mean, as best I understand, I guess you could say, when we're talking about greater access to the arts, are we talking about funding existing organizations and expanding their capacity to reach out to the community, or are you talking about funding the aspirational desires of new organizations who are smaller but are seeking funds to get started? And that seems to be the tension that I think we're finding in Measure P in its second year. How do you divide the money? And I mean, that's always going to be the tension.
Right.
But where do you come down philosophically and practically on dividing the money?
And in your conversations with the Fresno Arts Council, where does it seem that they lean on this?
Well, but it wasn't the Arts Council. It was ultimately the City Council decided on guidelines on where the money, projected how the money should be divided. Now, some of that, frankly, got bumped up. Emerging organizations in the recommended funding that would be before the PRAC. Emerging is receiving more money than was originally part of the guidelines. It's a very complicated process, as I best understand it. The Cultural Arts Subcommittee, sorry, this is really in the weeds.
So PRAC stands for Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission, and then they have a subcommittee.
A cultural arts subcommittee, which did some adjusting because the greatest number of applications they received this year were from emerging organizations, and that can also be individual artists that have a fiscal sponsor who want to do a specific project.
Yes, yeah. So another stipulation of Measure P arts funds is I myself, Kyle Lowe, I would not be able to just apply. I would need, the funds can only be given to a nonprofit organization.
Right.
So I would need to partner with a nonprofit organization to be my fiscal sponsor, be attached to my application. They would receive the money and then give the money to me and then probably take a small portion as
10%.
10% as an administration fee. So when I'm applying, I also need to work that 10% into my asking monies.
Sure.
If I'm figuring out how much it would cost to do my arts project.
So the way it stands right now, and we're just talking about rough numbers, there was roughly $6 million to give away this year.
Which is less than last year.
Quite a bit less.
Because of that whole period of like, we weren't sure if Measure P was gonna happen, the monies were collected, and then it was the first year and we said, oh, look at all this money we have stored up. So last year had more Measure P money, this year has less. Last year had less applicants, and this year has, so it's a smaller pie, and there's many more slices that need to be
essentially
made.
Last year, pretty much everybody got some
Applied.
sort of grant. This year, completely different story.
A little more cutthroat.
And the rough breakdown is about $1 million is earmarked for emerging, and about $5 million for established. Is that correct, Doug?
That's the recommended funding.
That's the recommended funding.
Right.
And that's
But what's
the subcommittee recommended. The subcommittee went to Fresno Arts Council and said, "Hey, I need you to go through these. I need you to make an application.
Right.
Go through these applications, and you tell us who we should give money
And
to.
they had
but
communi-
also, we think this is how the pie probably should
Right.
be divided.
And they had community volunteers who
that's
served
key.
as the panelists.
So it wasn't.
So Fresno Arts Council,
It wasn't
they
their
ran
staff.
that system,
Right.
but they had the panelists. But now the tension that is arising, and we're talking about this meeting tonight, where they were supposed to adopt and approve these grants.
Thank you for your recommendations. We will be moving forward.
That's all been put. It might be put on hold because emerging art organizations are saying they want more than that $1 million.
Yeah. Which, I mean, if they are truly the majority of applicants, I don't see why that couldn't be feasible.
But I think you have to put this in context. You know, it's like the Fresno Philharmonic is one applicant, but
Yes.
it has 100 employees.
Yes.
You know, and
they-
professional employees. You know,
Right. And they would be an established organization.
definitely.
Because they've already received Measure P funds and they're asking for that bigger
So I think the
amount.
philosophical divide here is who is an artist? And if you say you're an artist, does that mean you're a guarantee to get a $10,000 grant? And I think that is what the real tension that we're going to see tonight and maybe in the coming weeks, because they've already made these grant recommendations. So if they're going to increase the $1 million to the emerging,
Yeah.
they're going to have to take some away from the
Right. They'll
established.
have to reestablish,
And so that's
divvy up the
that's the
pie.
big question of who's going to get their grant reduced.
Yeah.
And I think it's also worth noting that the process is already 3 months behind.
3 months behind.
Right.
It's supposed
Yeah.
to start July 1st. We're almost to October 1st.
So if you had a season, say that you were had
Right,
been
'cause-
hoping to,
Part of the application is like, how is your art project going to lay out over the next year?
right?
And yeah, that's all going to have to share. And that also was partially the case for the original, the first year of Measure P. Things moved kind of slowly as well. I know some projects that had to move their timelines around based on when the funding finally was released
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So that may be par for the course. That might be for future applicants. You may want to consider that in your application as well. That the timeline may not be
Right. Don't be pitching a Halloween themed project
Funded.
because
Yeah,
your
you
odds of
probably
getting
not-
it by October maybe aren't that good.
Yeah. So yeah, between the emerging artists and the emerging organizations and projects and the established organizations and projects, it's almost like they were split. Like there's two pies to be pulled from, and of course, like you said, the established is much bigger than the emerging, but a majority of the applications came from emerging. So it will be very interesting to see if some backtracking happens, or if the PRAC says, no, we made the right call. We're gonna stick with this. One of the things that caught me by surprise, again, an outsider who did not read the application and just has friends who applied. It seemed like a lot of people were caught off guard by you're only getting 30%, you're only getting 60%, you're only getting 90% of what you asked for. Did it seem like, was there any indication in the application that this was that you could possibly only get 30% of what you asked for? And does this simply seem like people, the Fresno Arts Council said, oh shoot, we only have this amount of money and way more people applied, but we want to give them something. Let's do 30, 60, 90. Do you know, Doug, have anyone that you've talked to given an explanation as to how this came about? Or,
well, I think Donald could better
or
address
Donald?
whether that was part of the application, but I will tell you 2 weeks ago at the commission meeting, Parks, Recreation, and Arts Commission, one of the grantees who's slated to get 30% came before the commission and said, I'd ask the commissioners to consider whether giving really a little bit of money to a lot of people does as much good as giving a greater amount of money to a smaller amount of people.
Yeah.
Because if you can't really pull off your project with the amount of money you're getting and you have no other funding source,
it's just not going to happen.
it's not going to happen. So, and that was really the first time that had been articulated. But as you said, last year it was 100, 90, 80 was the split, and this year it's 90, 60, 30.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of applicants are in the 30% category.
Yeah, I feel like, I didn't apply, but I know through doing video production, it's just like, here's how much money, I tell someone like, hey, here's how much this is going to cost to make. And they come back and say, well, I've got 50% of that, or I've got 80% of that. And, having at least half or 80%, you could probably do a good majority of what you were originally planning, and you could probably still do something. But 30%, it's less than half, and it seems like it would be, no matter what you had imagined in any plan B or plan C that you may have had for such a project, you probably might not, you likely wouldn't be able to pull it off.
Devastated.
For organizations, it's just like, this is money to help keep the organization open. Maybe, you are probably likely to really scale down. Now, your organization probably isn't operating in the way that you would have hoped, but you would still have an organization with funding. But the project side of things, seems devastating.
And I mean, the example that Doug was using was Chanticleer, correct? So,
Yes.
here's
the Shakespeare.
The Shakespeare
they were only offered
30%.
30%. Okay.
And so this should have been the poster child for Measure P. We are going to have a professional Shakespeare theater company in town.
And with their funds from last year's Measure P, they put on Richard III.
Richard III,
And-
very successful. They brought in professional actors, very high caliber.
It was good.
It was really good. And now, they're given 30%. I also think that this system encourages people to inflate their budgets.
Right. If they know, like, especially if they knew from the previous year, like, I know I need this much to pull it off, but I might only get 80%, so I'm going to ask for more.
Right. And then that inflates all the asks.
Yeah.
But in the end, there isn't enough money to make everybody happy.
Sure.
And that's what we're going to have to come to terms with. So that's how we're going to have to come to terms between that divide between emerging and established. And we're going to have to come to terms with what is an artist? How much professional competency should you have to show before you receive city money? is it just if you say I like to paint watercolors, and I think I'm really good,
And I want to do an
want a grant,
exhibition. Yeah.
you know, I think there's going to have to be tighter and tougher standards for giving that money.
Yeah, but on the flip side, I also just think the whole process needs more structure. Like, you know, they know how much money, or they can project how much money they're going to have, and for you know, let's say for next recommendations for next year's Measure P applications, you know, let's say they're probably going to have maybe a little less, because everybody's tightening their belts. 2025 is a tough year. There may be less tax revenue. Maybe they have $5 million.
That's what they estimate they'll have on average per year.
$5 million.
Yes.
So if they can estimate that, maybe they say we have, and you know, there's a cap for both established and emerging organizations and projects. Why not just say at $150,000, we're going to be able to take 10 of these and give us the best application you got, make the best case for your art, established or not, or emerging, and these are the slots. Again, from my point of view, I only have video production, film background, but if I was applying for a grant to do a documentary, typically applying for these grants, there are a set number of slots. Like we have this grant, we're going to offer 10 filmmakers the opportunity to make a film each. There's 10 films. Here's how much funding you're going to get. Here's the application process. Yeah, why have like an open-ended box to say?
And also, I think we're going to have to make some choices about our big cultural institutions. We only have one Philharmonic.
Yes.
We only have one art museum.
Yeah.
And we also want to be able to give them enough money to really expand that access to make them better.
Yeah. And especially not disappear at the very least.
And also, just you think about how many people they employ, how much of an economic impact it has. But I agree with you about having the slots. I think there's...
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
I mean, it's already now been divided, you know, in the original year, it was organizations and projects. And now we're dividing those in half and essentially making 4 buckets. Again, yeah, why not maybe give that just a little more granularity, and an emerging project has X amount $1,000. And it's the watercolor artist and someone wanting to do what is the Fresno Rogue? What is that called? A fringe. I do want to do a fringe set in Fresno's Rogue Fringe Festival, and you know, those might cost about the same, so they can apply for that tier. I don't know. There's plenty to think about.
I think we can safely say that there needs to be a revamp of the whole selection process. There needs to be better training for the panelists.
Yeah.
There needs to be perhaps the idea of bringing in outside people to be on those panels. That's the way a lot of other grants programs work. So that eliminates also the kind of, I don't want to say prejudices, but the baggage, but the local stuff that people bring. You know, they already have ideas about what's good and bad, and you know, and they also, a lot of them know each other. And
Sure.
And so
if I could get my friend on the panel,
right,
I'll be more likely
if
to
you remove that level of insularity, I guess, then it will probably make the process quicker. And finally, I would also say that there needs to be an appeal process that actually means something. All the appeals this year were completely denied because they were so strict. They basically said you can't appeal unless there has been a clerical error. There needs to be somebody who can veto or who can step in. I don't know if it's the Arts Council. I don't know if it's, you know,
someone in the subcommittee.
But there needs to be some sort of
back and forth.
back and forth rather than just have these panels make decisions about things that they
hit
don't
the
really-
hammer, and then
they don't really
that's what
know
it is.
much. Some of them don't really know much about it.
Sure. Yeah. It's the entire PRAC has such a wide gamut of things that they cover.
Right.
That cultural arts can be such a big thing just on its own, but they're also
Right.
arts. They're
I
also
specialize
parks
in
and
tetherball.
recreation.
I don't know anything about arts.
Cultural arts. I'm here because someone's mad about a pickleball court. Yeah, I could see how more specificity could be beneficial to this. Now, not only are these PRAC meetings happening, there's also been some other little pop-up meetings amongst the community to talk amongst applicants. Have either of you been able to attend these community meetings about these? What's coming from these talks?
Well, there was a press conference last Thursday, which would have been September 25th, at which a new group called Coalition for Fresno Arts, but composed of people, or led by one of the applicants, and who is an advocate for many of the emerging organizations. They held a press conference asking for a halt to the process this year, and the next day the agenda came out for tonight's meeting, and a motion, an action item in which they would vote on the recommended funding was not there. So there is a halt.
And there was a suggestion of legal action by this group.
At the press conference.
They said they were advised by an attorney who they did not identify.
Sure.
So I think that also.
Right, there was certainly the
Impacted
implication of that.
Okay. Well, whether by leaning in and listening or by threat of litigation, it seems like the collective action of these applicants, they can move the needle in maybe a revision or a second look at these applications and this application process.
Can I just raise a question that I've wondered about?
Sure.
At what point does the Fresno City Council, which has the ultimate authority over the tax money raised in the city of Fresno, decide it wants to get involved with this? I think they've wanted to take a hands off because defining art is that's very subjective.
I know it when I see it.
Right. I think they've wanted to stay away from it. But the question is, are the growing pains now so strong that somebody needs to step in and provide some order?
Yeah, someone needs to threaten to cut the baby in half, huh? There's this Russian nesting doll of the authority of this. The Fresno Arts Council set up the applications, assessed the applications, made their recommendations to the subcommittee. Subcommittee goes to PRAC, Parks, Recreation, Arts Commission, and then the commission then hands that off to City Council, and City Council signs the check and says, all right, now divvy up the money.
And the only correction I would make to what you just said is that the Arts Council seeks volunteers from the community.
Yes.
They score the applications.
Yes, so the fifth layer to that is
Right.
is also the panelists of community volunteers.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a long train in which this money gets decided upon, and it'll be very interesting. I look forward to more the outcome and more reporting on it. So I know we've been at it for a hot minute, and I don't want to keep you any longer. So as this story develops, where can people learn more about Measure P and the arts in the Valley?
MunroReview.com.
MunroReview.com.
MUNRO review.com.
Yeah.
And
where it's all about connecting, sharing, and valuing.
And, I would get on the site just to read Doug because he knows so much about this topic. I'm convinced he is our Measure P expert in the city, and he can really explain what's going on.
Yeah, and it is such a complicated issue because there are so many layers to how it works that I appreciate you digging in and finding as much information as possible and laying it out in a way that's easily digestible. But yeah, I have a lot of friends who applied, and they're all kind of confused about what's going on. So I'm very interested to see how the rest of this Measure P round shakes out. And I want to thank you for spending an hour and a half with me today to talk about what's happening at COS, your article, the response to that, and now Measure P. And again, yes, MunroReview.com. Articles are free, but you can also support the page by becoming a member of the MunroReview.com as well. What do people...
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Are you going to let the next episode of the Munro Review on CMAC go 90 minutes?
If it needs to, yeah, I've never cut you off. I've never said, wrap it up, Donald.
You're right.
Let's get out of here. Cool. So yes, thank you again. Thank you to Leah Dewey for joining us today for our conversation about College of the Sequoias Theater Arts Department. And thank you for watching. This has been the Lowdown Live. I want to thank our crew. We got Ben and Jesse and Hannah holding it down in the CMAC studio. This production is made possible by the Community Media Access Collaborative. CMAC can be found in downtown Fresno and at cmac.tv. This production is also made possible by our patrons on Patreon. Check that out at patreon.com/Kyle Lowe. And if you want to see more shows like this, this may just be a one-off show, but if you want to see more, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit subscribe and hit that thumbs up button if you found this interesting or at least entertaining. And we will see you later. Goodbye. All right, we did it.